movie.
No. All right,
Uh,
and we're live.
I am recording.
Tell your friends you're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
We have another very special episode. We have the 1977 movie Exorcist 2 The Heretic. Nathan, what's your history with Exorcist 2?
I didn't know anything about it, except it was like considered one of the weirdest sequels ever made
Eh.
to a tentpole franchise.
Yeah, sure.
And me and Stacy were watching it once about 5 years ago, and I was like, "What the hell is this time travel?" Like, because I kind of like was in and out.
Yeah.
And so I remembered it's like, yeah, there was a lot of weird things going on, but it was a very good looking movie with good looking people in it. And it just didn't seem to be, it's like, wow, I mean, it seems like a horror movie. It seems like there's things from The Exorcist in it, but it was also had a lot of crazy stuff going on. So this was the first, I glanced at it 5 years ago and I just sat down and watched it last night.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah, I mean, my first time watching The Exorcist is when we did it for this movie, so so I've not watched the rest of the Exorcist series. So, um, but yeah, it's definitely like, yeah, like if you look at like the ratings for it on Internet Movie Database, it's like this must be one of the worst movies ever. But then you look at it on Amazon, it's like 4 stars, and so it's a perfectly fine movie. I'd put this like in the sort of like 2010, which is like a perfectly fine movie. It's just following up one of the best movies of all time. So like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because this movie was made without the input of either the writer, the director, or anyone involved with the first movie. Not because they didn't want to do it or whatever, but because they were so involved with suing each other and the studio that they couldn't get around to it. John Borman was supposed to be the original director for the first one, but he passed on it because he said he felt it was too negative and weird. But then he came around for this one because he was just coming off of Zardoz,
okay,
flew into this, which you can tell because
yeah.
this really seems like a movie where someone's like, let's make a sequel to Exorcist. Okay, how do you want to do that? Well, we're going to watch The Exorcist, but we're going to take a bunch of drugs first. Then we're just going to write whatever comes into our minds. And
Yeah, I can't remember when Altered States came out, and like, but like, Clockwork Orange was around this time, right? So,
Clockwork Orange would have been earlier than this because John Borman was good friends with Stanley Kubrick, and he said like, how can I make a sequel to The Exorcist? What would you do? And he goes, I would go in a totally different direction from the original because you're not going to top that original just doing what they
I
what
mean,
they
it's
did in the original.
it still kind of holds because like the original, there was a lot of like, because you'd think it's something called The Exorcist, it would just be pure, religious ideology being thrown at a demon, and then like none of it would make sense. But it's actually like, here's a man of faith and science, and it's like, oh, that's interesting and weird,
Yeah,
and that continues on here. It's just purporting to be more science than faith for this movie.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, director's John Borman. I forget, like on Internet Movie Database, it lists 2 directors. I don't know if you looked up what was going on there, Nathan.
John Borman got very sick and essentially did not film the last third of the movie. It was
Okay.
his second unit director did most of that work
Okay.
because they released this in theaters and then John Borman had to re-edit it and then they re-released it in
Wow,
theaters.
I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
Yeah, this movie was like production hell
Yeah.
the whole time. Um, they had a great cast. They had a beautiful, stunning, Oscar-worthy cast. But they just ran into so many problems, and they didn't have any guidance. And John Borman just had a completely different vision. He was like, I want to do a movie that's more positive and more hopeful than the original Exorcist.
Huh.
He said it essentially ended with a guy killing himself. He goes, I want a different resolution.
Yeah, which they never acknowledge in this movie.
They didn't want to talk about it,
Because
saying there was a lot of
there's like this intonation that's like, we couldn't rule out that Father Marin didn't kill himself. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the other guy killed himself. Like, let's go.
no, the other guy threw himself out a window.
Um, cinematographer is William A. Fraker. He
Yes,
probably
this.
has he probably has more like prodigious like camera and electrical department credits than director of photography credits, but
Well, no, this guy actually, if you watch Rosemary's Baby, this has that very gauzy Rosemary Baby look, and he was the director of
oh,
photography
he
on
was?
that.
Okay, I didn't see
Yep,
that.
yep.
Okay.
He actually did a lot of movies like Tombstone,
Okay.
Murphy's
Oh,
Bromance,
Bullet. Yeah, Bullet's definitely revolutionary for stuff like that. So yeah, this guy was on top of things. So
War Games. Yeah, this guy was around. As a matter of fact, he died.
wait,
He died
did
in 2010. Yeah.
uh, did he do it? Was he director of photography on War Games? Okay. Here on mine, it lists his camera and electrical department stuff first, which he gets listed on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and yeah.
Well, he was listed as a cinematographer in a lot of
Oh
those
yeah,
movies.
no, there he is in War Games. Yeah, so yeah, War
Yeah.
Games. It's Sharky's Machine, the best little whorehouse in Texas. Might be. You ever seen that movie? That sounds like such an off-putting title, but it's like a comedy, right?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's kind of 70s, 80s funny, but it's
Yeah.
funny.
Okay.
It's one of those movies where it's more of a comedy of its time. It's not like Airplane where it's like, like a generational genius comedy. It's more like
Uh,
this is funny in its time and place.
oh, he was the cinematographer on Coonskin. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That's
Is
a
that
Ralph Bakshi movie.
Sebastian? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
It's a
about racism, right?
uh-huh. It's a fucking crazy movie.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen it.
um, but
But yeah,
for a racist name, it's about racism, so that's why it's like called that. So
yeah, it's a wild like interpretation of racism too.
yeah,
Um, that the one where they sing about Hitler only having one ball? Is that the one of the songs?
maybe I can't. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Or is that Jones and the Cat? I don't remember. Yeah, all
It's
that
like
bad.
about it's about like a stripper and a lot of racist iconography, but being brought together as like main characters in the movie. So,
Yeah, because I discovered Ralph Bashki when I was like, there was a Lord of the Rings animated.
yeah,
It's like, yes, there was. It's like cool. It's like, oh no, no, not cool. Strange, weird, but
yeah.
um,
Because
and
yeah, what
actually,
wasn't the who are the famous guys for doing like cheap productions? They did like the Hobbit one, right?
yeah, that
The
was they were connected with the schools. Like they did stuff for schools, so they got like money to make educational videos. Yeah, that was was that Rankin and Fitch?
oh, Rankin and Bass, Rankin Bass, Rankin and Bass.
Rankin and Base, maybe. Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, Rankin and Bass animated. So yeah,
Yeah, they did the Hobbit, and then they did the Return of the King,
yeah. Okay.
which was more of a kind of a return. Because the thing with Lord of the Rings, it was so experimental and strange. It was like,
Well, a lot of what Ralph Bakshi does is like let's film a practical element and draw on top of it. So
yeah, which is
it's
kind of cool in a
yeah,
way. Also becomes jarring after a while.
yeah.
People have always told me, "Oh, so you got to watch the animated Lord of the Rings and get really high," and it's like that. No, that doesn't fun.
We have good
Just
ones. We can just go to
high
those.
doing things just takes me out of it.
Yeah.
It's like I don't even remember what just happened. It's like, well, you're getting too high. Maybe you're smoking the wrong stuff. It's like maybe it's not for me. Maybe that's. But yeah. So if you've seen Rosemary's Baby, which is one you should watch,
I
the
have
guy,
not seen.
it's actually a wonderful movie. You should
Okay.
watch it. It's cool. But you'll recognize the cinematography from this and that because it's that
Okay.
same gauzy style, which
Yeah.
actually makes it more horrifying for some reason.
Um, the writer is William Goodhart, who basically this is the only thing he's
Yes,
known
I
for.
could find nothing about the guy. So
I mean,
this,
he's got other credit. He's got some movie called Generation, came out in 1969. And then some movie called Cloud Dancer came out in 80 and was so no idea. So it's just a guy. Maybe it was just a guy working in the production company. It's like we need somebody to take the fall for this. So here you go.
they were actually quite proud of it when it came out.
Yeah.
It's the fan reaction. Like I think some executives almost got attacked at it, like what do they call that? A sneak preview.
Yeah,
Like people were like, "Who made this piece of shit?" What?
yeah.
It's like, "Oh!" I think that was why Borman had to go in and re-edit it.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this isn't a terrible movie. It's just they follow up to a like a tentpole movie. So
Yeah,
if you just make it by comparison, it's going to look way worse. So Cast is Richard Burton, who I feel like I know him from stuff.
We would probably know him the most from 1984.
Okay.
He was inner party. What was his name? He was the inner party guy, the guy who tortured Winston.
O'Brien.
Yeah, he was.
Right, yeah. Oh,
It was
wasn't he
his.
dying during that movie?
Yes, he was actively. Yeah, he was
Okay.
dead before the movie came out. Yeah,
Huh. Okay.
he died at 58. He was. He was. You think a dreary English childhood is terrifying? Try a dreary Welsh childhood. You're 12 of 13 kids, and your mom died giving birth to the 13th child. It's like, yeah, you're gonna be a dark dude growing up like that. And yeah, he was essentially at some point he did this movie because he was on his second divorce
Okay.
from what was her name, the very famous. Let me look this up because I wanted to talk about this. Because the only reason he agreed to do this is he was where I love it when my screen locks up. He was on his second divorce from Elizabeth Taylor.
Okay.
And he took this movie because of the lawyer's fee.
Wait, his second divorce from her or his second?
Married and divorced twice. He divorced her once. They were divorced for a year. Then he remarried her. It didn't last a year.
Okay.
The money, he got a boatload of money for being in this because he was a named actor.
Yeah.
Actually, everyone in this was, but he was like, and it basically paid for his divorce from Elizabeth Taylor.
Huh.
He was essentially a whiskey, 3 bottle of whiskey a day drinker, who also smoked on average 100 cigarettes a day. Now, when he did 1984, he had sobered up quite a bit and wasn't doing that. But I guess for this movie and a few other movies, he was smashed the whole time. And when the cameras were off, he was smoking a cigarette and he was drinking something. And yeah, he died at 58. It's shocking. Right? Yeah, that's. Because I don't think I smoked at my worst as a smoker. I don't think I smoked 100 cigarettes a month, like a day. That's like 20, 40, 60, 80. That's 5 packs of cigarettes a day. I mean, that nowadays that would be like a heroin habit. It's so expensive. It's
yeah.
So that's a lot of cigarettes, and 3 bottles of liquor a day is insane. The most I've ever done is 1, and I was sick for a week afterwards. So it's like that's really. I'm surprised he lived to be 58. And that is not something that's like a rumor or a story. That's something he was very open about. Like, yeah, I like to drink like that. It's fun. It calms it. But he said when he's not acting, he was miserable.
Okay.
Loved being on the stage. He loved being on the screen. That's when he felt alive. It was in between those times where he's like, yeah, I'm drinking 3 bottles of whiskey. There's something about people that can act and are creative or something. There's a madness and a power that like it always seems to go that way.
Magic's in getting away from you, disassociating from yourself.
Yeah, I guess.
Linda Blair, who of course is coming back from the original, and I don't know, she did some stuff. She's like pretty good in this movie, but I don't think she really did anything big after this. So she was just kind of always known as the Exorcist girl. So.
Yeah.
And then Louise.
Yeah, I know she came with a lot of caveats to be in this.
Oh yeah.
I'm not doing makeup. Apparently there was a more rapacious sex scene that was supposed to happen later in the movie, and she's like, "Hell no." Also, I think she was like 17.
Yeah, no, yeah, she was like 17 in this movie. So
those scenes. I mean, I get it. It's the 70s and everyone's gross, but yeah, she said no, thank you.
But and then Louise Fletcher, who is probably most known for being Nurse Ratched. So.
Yep. Which is funny when you see her in this. It's like, that's Nurse Ratched.
She's a helpful psychiatrist here.
Yes.
Or she's a medical doctor. I can't remember. Because at some point she...
Psychiatrist.
Okay. Well, I guess that's both, right? If you're a psychiatrist, you're a therapist and a medical doctor. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Because they're the only people that can prescribe medication for stuff. So.
Yeah, those are the deeply sad people that have to deal with all those problems and give out medicine.
no, no pressure.
Well, yeah, it's like I want to be a doctor. Okay, like worst job I could ever imagine. And then I want to study human emotions and treat the problems. It's like, oh boy, okay. So you just want to be like put hang from a rope and use as a punching bag. Okay.
Maybe pathology is the way to go.
Yeah.
So I hear that's like the lowest of the low for a doctor. Like if you ended up in pathology and then you're a shitty doctor or something. So
Well, you can't really kill dead
yeah.
patients. So. But I don't know if that's true or not. All I know is if I was smart enough to be a doctor, I'd go into finance. It's like, hey, you got the scores. You could do this. It's like, I'll be going into finance.
Yeah, as we can see from various other, what was it Kim Jong? Um, is it Kim? Yeah, or is it Ken Jong? The guy who was a doctor and now he's like a comedian.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's still like, well, I remember like an interview he did like 5 years ago. He's still like he kept up all his license, so he still is like a general practitioner. I'm not sure if he's still doing that, but that was like amazing. Just like,
Well, yeah, he explained it as like his parents are like, you will become a doctor because he's like parents was like Chinese immigrants or something.
yeah.
And he's like, yeah, okay, I became a doctor. Now I'm going into acting. Okay, as long as you did the work and became a doctor. Okay, that's an interesting compromise, but all right.
So
There was someone who wanted to. I remember there was a guy who became a doctor in the UK, and he's like, I just wanted to make documentary films. His parents were Pakistani,
yeah.
and it's like he's an actual doctor, but he just quit, and he's like, well, I became a doctor, and my parents said I had to, so but now I'm gonna. I mean, he went back to college to become a documentary filmmaker, and he says this is stressing me out too now. So it's like,
But yeah, if you have the compulsion to finish being a doctor, you can basically be anything you want. So
yeah, I just want to be the guy. It's like I said, it's like, do you want to be a doctor or heal people? It's like I want to be the guy on American Psycho who's just like a stock you're and a lunatic. It's like that seems like more fun, more satisfying.
oh yeah, Act One, we get weird screaming over the credits and discordant music. We open on a preacher being brought into an exit. Is this Father Philip here? I can't remember. It must be
No,
right because he's haunted
yeah,
later on.
this is Father Lamont.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just call him Philip the whole time, so it's like Father Philip Lamont. So
this is in the same post-apocalyptic Italy we've seen in other movies.
oh, okay.
That's where this opens, I believe. I think they said this was in northern Italy or something.
He's got a picture of Max von
Oh no,
Sydow.
that's America. I'm wrong. Sorry.
He's got a picture of Max von Sydow in his book, who like he does make new appearances for this movie, but it's all like very isolated from the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Um,
As he looks at a picture of
Father Marin, yeah.
and he's like,
Merrin, which I first just wrote it like Mark Maron rather than him that way. So it's like, oh, now I'm kind of disappointed.
and he's like, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, like he changes it up. He's like, you walk with me, which I thought was cool. Now, now I'm going to start my day and look at a picture of Max von Sydow and say that.
There's actually some pretty good dialogue in this movie.
But there's a lot of good things in this movie.
Yeah. Gritted screaming comes from the Spanish lady. He throws holy water on her, and she like asks why in Spanish. ¿Por qué? And then she says in English, "Why me? I heal the sick," which this will be like a common theme. Then the lady starts knocking over candles and ends up setting herself on fire, and she smiles and burns. So that's unsettling. Yeah. So, then we cut to Reagan, played by Linda Blair. Is that like dance practice? Which I'm guessing she's in high school or something.
Yeah, some kind of tap dancing stuff.
She hangs behind and tap dances for the saxophone player, but like it never becomes like a thing further on in the movie. It's just like this little moment. We cut to there's a lady. This must be Dr. Jean Tuskin, I think here. She's doing tests with a deaf patient. Then Reagan shows up, and this is like a children's hospital or therapy or something like that.
Something like that.
It's got this weird like kind of like open. What do you call that? I forget what like office spaces, but it's all open rather than closed. But like here, it's got like closed
Open
space.
concept,
Yeah,
but
sort of open concept. Like all the office areas like have windows on like all sides, so you can see inside the office. And then there's just kind of little honeycomb areas like all over the place. Is quite interesting. I'm guessing this must have been a set built and not like an actual hospital.
no, it would make people crazy to go into it. And it made the camera crew crazy because they had all those mirrored surfaces everywhere, and they got to set up cameras and
Yeah.
do shoots where the lights and everything aren't reflected and easily seen. So, but it looked totally 70s, had that groovy 70s
Yeah.
vibe. Like this is the future. The future has got a lot of mirrors and no personal space. Everyone can see what you're doing. Like close the door to the perfectly glass lined room. It's like, oh, is this going to be like a skiff and it goes dark when like it has an opacity thing?
The future is bright in Carter's America.
Yeah,
um, then some kids are like beating up another kid with a pillow and nobody's stopping it, so that's weird. Yeah, let them express themselves. Then Reagan sits down with like I said, therapy. Yeah, I guess she's a psychologist or no, wait, psychiatrist. Yeah, psychiatrist. That's the
yeah,
one, right? Okay. Dr. Jean Tuscan, played by Louise Fletcher. She says like she isn't having dreams, which I think is like that's just a lie. So, and then they point out that she doesn't remember the time in Washington, so that's the whole Exorcist time. Um, and then the doctor has like some hypnosis machine she wants to try, which is like almost interesting, but ultimately just kind of stupid.
yeah. This is where this movie gets cool.
Yeah.
It's because they have basically 70s style, like we're going to hypnotize you virtual reality where you're going to
Yeah.
have a shared dream experience with somebody else. And it's like, that's wild. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, it's a good
very,
idea. And even like this first scene where they start like merging like the film together, like it's kind of cool. But then after that, it's just blinking lights, and then we cut to memory. So
yeah. Yes, the opening scene with this device that is like, this is cool. This is very ahead of its time.
yeah,
It's like we're going to sync our hypnosis
yeah,
and
yeah.
have,
It's literally called like hypnosis sync or whatever. But
yeah,
I mean, all that stuff is garbage. But it's basically just a way to get to virtual reality before that's even like a concept.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I appreciated the weirdness of people staring into flashing lights.
yeah,
And then some of the film effects they did with those flashing lights later made them seem more intense,
yeah,
larger than they were, almost like a life of their own. They made it creepy.
yeah.
Because one of the
And
big
like and
problems,
good sound design with it too.
oh
So
yeah, because one of the big problems with this movie, virtually no scares in it.
yeah,
It's the thing. It's just, it manages to be creepy and keep you guessing, but
yeah.
not because of like it's beautifully crafted as a script. It's because it gets so incoherent. It's like, what's going to happen next? Who knows?
We got some papal stuff going on here. I'm not. Are they at just some church, or are they at the Vatican here?
I'm assuming it's the Vatican, being this guy goes through a whole costume change while they're talking.
Okay. Yeah, here we get Father Philip Lamont. So he's back. This played by Richard Burton, and he's tasked with investigating the death of or was he a doctor? Father Marin? Was he a doctor or an archaeologist? I can't remember.
I think he was an archaeologist. He might have had a PhD.
Okay, that's Max von Sydow's character from the first movie.
Yeah.
Although, like in that movie, he has aged makeup, which is kind of goofy, and then in this movie, they don't give him any aged makeup. So,
Yeah, he just looks like a young man. Yeah.
but also like that, it's supposed to make sense because like when in his flashbacks, it is from a much further time back. So, because because James Earl Jones goes from a child to a kid, it's like okay, that must be like 40 years in between. So that would make sense. So, and a good bit of dialogue here where Father Philip is like, I see only evil, God has fallen silent. Yes.
As always, I love like this political intrigue that they give to the Vatican around like exorcisms, and so they always have these scenes, and it's good dialogue. And by the way, the guy playing the priest is Paul Heinrich, who is like I think his most famous role is you'd know him from Casablanca.
Okay.
But he's been acting since like silent movie days. This was his this movie.
Oh, okay, huh?
Yeah, because he was born. Like if you look up his birthplace, it was like in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's like that's he was from way back. uh, but they always have these scenes of like intrigue. It's like we must gather the facts and support this, or it'll discredit the church or whatever. And I always, when I hear this stuff, and I was like, these are intelligent men, they're having a great dialogue scene, but basically your truck and trade is bullshit anyway. Like, what
Yeah,
facts are you going to aggregate to like line all this up in a row, and who for and why? You just say whatever you want.
yeah. It's I don't know, like like, yeah. It seems like it's actually a noble pursuit they put here, like on the church, when it seems like they don't actually do that at all.
no, you wouldn't think that it's like talking to the Pope. For me, it's like, oh, we're talking to the dungeon master of our next adventure. And it's like, we must align forces and make all this stuff happen. And it's like, no, you guys are just world-class bullshitters in funny costumes. It's like, I don't get, like, I just can't imagine. To me, I can't imagine internally they're like having this dialogue. It's just like, hey, how do we get the peasants to give us more money? Well, okay, new plan: stop raping children. It's like, we'll stop doing that. And then but yeah, I do enjoy these scenes. It was the same thing in that movie. What was this crazy one with Tom Hanks? It was the book. What was it called? The Da Vinci Code.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was like, this could undo the church. It's like they could find out it's all not what they say it is. It's like, duh. I mean, yeah, they could, but
Yeah, well, that seems like how the church would actually act. Like, let's suppress this.
Yeah.
Rather than like, let's investigate. So that'll be in then Act 1, because we like got some psychologist stuff going on with the Reagan character, and then we have Philip Lamont sit on to investigate the death of Father Merrin, but like on the side, it's like not an official investigation. So.
Yeah.
Got Act 2. Father Philip is at the children's hospital. He meets with Tuscan. She couldn't rule out suicide for Father Merrin, so that's kind of like, okay, that's what they're doing here, really. So, and maybe Merrin was onto something, they don't know. Philip warns the doctor of evil, which she doesn't believe in evil, so like, yeah.
I do like that Richard Burton dialogue.
Yeah.
I want to tell you what you're fighting, doctor. And she's like, oh, we're dealing with mental illness. You're dealing with evil. That's cool.
Yeah, she just takes it in stride, like, okay.
Yeah, she just reacts. He's like, evil is your opponent. She's like, no, it's it's a mental illness. It's a product of a sick society. No, it is evil. I just love how he delivers some of this. Some of this dialogue's not bad, but some of it's like just mouthful of marbles, like nonsense too. So
Reagan insists on using the hypnosis machine now, but they don't. And then we cut to a scene where it's like Reagan's at home with who's like the assistant lady, because like her mom never shows up. Sharon, yeah. And they have like some spoon bending nonsense going on. This is back when you could. I mean, here it's like revealed that like, oh yeah, it is nonsense. They're not like here's actual powers, but like, this is back in the time there's enough. You could project enough disbelief that like, oh, maybe magic is real. So,
it was kind of a special time. I remember I could tell the best lies in the 80s and 90s before everyone had a computer in their pocket.
Yeah.
You could just be like, I don't think that's true. Yeah, see here, it's not true. It was like before, it's like, there's a whole city in America that disappeared one night and they don't know what happened. I mean, I'm making it up.
Yeah.
Horse shit, but you can't like disprove it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not going to do the legwork to disprove you. So.
Yeah, you know what I heard? It's like, yeah. And it was even better than to me when a story came back to me a week later. Hey, guess what I heard? Do tell.
I want to see like how my lie is expanded.
Yeah, it was the best. It was like, oh, I get to have
boomerang storytelling, but a different boomerang comes back. So.
Well, it's like now I get to have cheesecake with raspberries. It's come around. Yeah. Lying. What a treat.
Then we cut back. We have Reagan's being hooked up to the hypnosis machine, which like they just basically put kind of like probes on their head, and then they have these two lights that flash, and so it's kind of like As makes a sort of sense.
Yeah.
Just create an epileptic seizure that gives you memories, you know?
I mean, I think it's a cool scene.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of the things with it. Here's the whole thing with this movie. There's a lot of cool ideas in it. It just shouldn't have been the sequel to The Exorcist. If it
Yeah.
was its own thing, people would be like, "Remember that weird movie where they had the prototype VR machine and they fought a demon?" It's like, yeah, that's cool, yeah, but because this had the Exorcist name tied
Yeah.
to it, his expectations were just stupendous.
Yeah, she looks at the strobe light. She's in a hypnotic state, and she's like answering a very monotone, which Linda Blair is very good at this.
Yes.
Um, Tuscan asks about Washington. Now the doctor gets hit with a strobe light and goes into a trance, which is interesting. And then Reagan starts instructing the doctor, which is a cool like turnabout where it's like the doctor's in a trance too. It's like who's in control, and it's like the assistant. um, yeah, and like yeah, like they mentioned like instructing the doctor to come down to her level, which I don't know what that means, but whatever, you know, whatever makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Philip starts questioning Reagan. Tuscan starts to have like a negative reaction to it. Um, Reagan comes to and like takes her head sensor off, and then Philip jumps in to like help Tuscan out of the hypnosis. And then we have basically like scenes from the first movie, or is this newly shot? I can't remember. But it's like the first movie overlaid on top of the scene as
Yeah.
Philip watches on. Um, Marin's like having a hard time breathing, and then so is Tuscan. And and there's like this weird overlay where it's like they have like internals of like her heart being crushed, and then you have like the the first Exorcist Reagan like reaching for the heart, and then you have like the current day Reagan like rubbing her chest, and it's like all very weird because like one's trying to kill her, one's trying to help her or something. So, but then from Philip's perspective, it's like they're both trying to kill the doctor. So very interesting and weird. And this is probably like maybe the most like disconcerting scene in the movie. Like this is the scariest scene in the movie.
Yeah. It seems it's the most gross, or at least one of them.
Yeah, I think the foot thing at the end is probably the grossest. um let's see here. Tuscan gets out of the memory and is alive because it looks like she's gonna die. It's like, well, that's some stakes if you're gonna die in this hypnosis thing. But I guess it must be hopeful because only like one person dies in this movie, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, a couple people, but yeah, not main
Oh
characters.
yeah, I forget the chasm has like some deaths in that too. So
Yeah.
Um. Reagan doesn't remember the scene, but it seems like Philip does. That's always supposed to be this thing is like you're not supposed to remember after the hypnosis trance, but it seems like everybody remembers everything, or is at
Well,
least affected by it.
because the doctor was told to forget.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because when Richard Burton stepped in, who by the way never seen this equipment before in his life, he's like,
Let me wing this.
I'm a dream warrior. It's like, okay, cool, this is great. But that's the whole logic of this movie right here. Is just like everything just jumps and jumps. Like I said, it looks cool though. Everything looks very cool.
The name of this procedure is synchronized hypnosis, and this is a completely new thing that Dr. Tuscan made. So
yeah.
Philip talks about Reagan being possessed and killing Marin. We cut to Reagan draws a weird picture of Philip, where it has like it's kind of like I thought it had like devil horns, but it's like just kind of like weird hair lines or something like that.
It's flames, yeah.
Well, there's flames, but then there's like kind of almost like this, like I don't know how to describe, but it has a style to it. So
yeah.
Philip
Japanese to me, like Japanese pen line art or something.
Yeah. Philip has some flashback about needing to put the flames out or whatever, but it's also in the present, and then so he's running around looking for fire, and he just finds a like they go down to like a maintenance area and he finds a cardboard box that's on fire, and he beats the fire with a wooden crutch, and like this seems all like a bad idea. So.
The best way to put out fire is to beat it with something flammable.
Yeah.
And spread it all around.
And then there's just like dolls in the box, so even like what's on fire doesn't make any sense. So. Tuscan takes a pause as like reality from like lines up with the picture where it's like you see flames behind Father Philip. We cut to the hospital is evacuated. Philip thinks the machine can be used for exorcism, so like he's really, and then the doctor's just like, okay, whatever, dude. So, we cut to Reagan. I wrote Reagan has a dream of ancient times, but then like I see Marin's head in there, and it's like, oh, this is just some time in Marin's past. Um, I wrote a plague of locusts in Egypt, but like it's Ethiopia, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we like cut to like reality. Reagan gets up and is walking around. She's like in a dream state, so she's sleepwalking, but like her eyes are open. But the dream's still going on. She walks out to the edge of the roof and is awakened by doves flying at her, and she screams and nearly falls. Where it's like every time they show this, like the edge of this building, it's like, why are there no safety rails completely surrounding the edge of this fucking building?
Yeah, this sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah.
Anyone could get drunk and just do a gainer off that roof.
Yeah.
Destroy an old-fashioned checker taxi cab at any moment.
I guess it's the 70s. They didn't care. So.
No
Style over substance,
Yeah.
functionality and safety. So. Sharon comes to find Reagan, but she's just like feeding the dove, so like she doesn't witness her like almost die. So it's like, yeah, everything's fine. And it seems Reagan doesn't remember it at all, even though she like scared herself when she like woke up essentially. Or she just didn't want to worry Sharon, so she's like, I'm just gonna hide that. So, Philip meets with Reagan. He goes into Reagan's room. Oh wait, no, Philip meets. No, we cut to Washington and Sharon's there, and Philip meets her there. He goes into Reagan's room for the first movie, and there's like a locust hanging around, so it's like the eyes of Pazuzu or something. Which here they make it like Pazuzu's like the god of, or the demon of like wind or something like that. So.
It's like a demon of wind and flying things or something.
And then Philip like kind of kneels down and prays here. He even prays for Sharon, who isn't religious, so, or if she's trying to be or something. I don't know. There's like a whole arc with her that's weird. So. I feel like I missed it. Like it's probably profound, but it's like.
No, it was all confusing. Okay. It's hard to keep up.
We cut to I think Philip's talking to Tuscan, and Tuscan reveals that she has 2 kids and is divorced. And then she asks the father Philip's like, so are you ever in needing of a woman? And he's like, yes. it's like, yeah. Oh, what's that mean?
Yeah. Do you ever need a woman? Yes. No ambiguity.
We got to synchronized hypnosis with Reagan and Philip. They go into another Marin memory, and they find Pazuzu there. Here it's sort of like Reagan kind of has the Pazuzu voice. It says, call me by my dream name. Then we see Marin does an exorcism in a cavern. Like this, they have this boy like descending through this like narrow cavern, and he's like doing an exorcism, and everything's like falling apart, and people are falling down the cavern and weird slow-mo things, and then just eventually just tossing a dummy down a cavern. So Pazuzu retreats to the body of the boy healer, because that's the whole, like, that's what we first see this vision. It's like this boy like chases away the locust somehow, but it also invites Pazuzu, or Pazuzu is a locust, or whatever. And then the camera like zooms in, and we see James Earl Jones shows up, and then he growls, and it's the boy healer all grown up. So it's like, oh yeah, I wasn't expecting that in this movie. I mean, I did see his name in the credits, but I wasn't expecting any. I had no expectations of how he would end up in this movie. So
yeah.
Reagan and Philip come out of the hypnosis, and they both like remember things, like again, it's like they're not supposed to or something like that. But then we cut to Reagan talks with an autistic girl who has a speech impediment. So I don't know if that's either or just meant the same thing back in the 70s.
Yeah, I think well, that's back when the autism was rare, before like every other person had it.
So. Yeah. So yeah, she starts talking to her, and she says like she's never talked before, and so like from our perspective, it's like this girl can talk. We don't understand. And then the girl asks like, "What's wrong with you?" And she says, "I was possessed by a demon, but he's gone now." So that's a pretty funny line. Then the girl talks to her mother, and her mom gets really emotional because she's never heard her daughter talk before, and so she's like, "I gotta take her home so she can talk to her dad. Like, we gotta hurry up before she stops talking." So, um, and then this gives like kind of Reagan some like she feels special now that she can help the other kids, but then Tuscan cautions her on this because like she has no idea what's going on because she's like, well, there's something weird with Reagan, and we don't know if this is good power being bestowed upon children or evil somehow, in like infecting children. I don't. I don't know, like the evils of making an autistic child talk, but who knows? I don't know if that comes up in Exorcist 3 or not. The only thing I remember from Exorcist 3 is there's like a nurse with giant scissors that walks through a scene.
Yeah, there was a few weird things that went on, and Exorcist 3 had some good scenes in it.
Then we cut to Philip and Reagan are at a museum to pick up a clue on where the healer is because Dr. Tuscan thinks Reagan's just remembering something from a museum and not like the memory they shared together. But like Philip's like, no, it's the memory. They get the name Kokumo. Um, and then Philip goes to get permission from the Vatican to go to Africa, which I think they say no, and then we cut to Philip's in Africa. He climbs the walls to get to like the spot in the vision, and Philip joins a ceremony and like confesses his sins, for like he like didn't follow the church and came around on his own accord, and then does the body and blood of Christ on top of this. Like, are they in Ethiopia here? Or is this someplace like different?
I always thought it was Ethiopia.
Okay, it's all Ethiopia. Okay.
Yeah.
Um. Then we cut to Tuscan shows up at Reagan's place. They go on the roof. Reagan says Tuscan needs to help Philip. They talk about going into sync, but like in the dangers of it. So then we cut back to Philip goes investigating, and we intercut with Reagan and her dance routine. Philip pisses off the natives by talking about Pazuzu, and then like the natives start like throwing rocks at him, and then Reagan starts to feel the pain of Philip, which is like interesting, but then it's like never really followed up on. It's just like a weird thing to happen.
I just assumed it's like, oh, they're still synced in some way.
Yeah. Philip runs away, and then Reagan falls off the stage and starts convulsing, which seems more like something from the first movie. And then the sync sound plays, and so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's where they kind of like, oh, okay, this is what's going on.
Yeah, they kind of they kind of bring that up where like it kind of almost acts like kind of like an unreliable narrator at some point, where it's like they almost intimate like, was this all a dream, or are we all in a sync state? Like, what's the real perspective going on here? So, is this some Assassin's Creed shit?
Yeah, are we in some simulation?
Reagan wakes up. She asks not to be drugged. It keeps her from dreaming. Then we cut to we're like on a beach, and then a plane lands, and this guy Edwards, played by Ned Beatty, who we last saw in the our previous movie Deliverance, which I'm guessing he just made. I don't know. How often did Borman use Ned Beatty?
As far as I know, this is the only one I can remember where he followed up with him.
Okay, I didn't know if there was like a thing between him and Ned Beatty, or if it's but like Edward shows up in a plane on the beach, and he's like carrying a Jesus on the cross and brings that in, and then they take a plane ride further into Africa, which is interesting that he just like this whole seems is just to move the character from one place to another, but they introduce a character that never use again, so it's like. And like, what's he supposed to be, Irish? Like, he's not American, right?
I really couldn't tell.
Okay.
I thought he was trying to do something, but I couldn't.
Yeah, I was like, is he like South African or something? And then at the end, he almost sounded
trying to be South African. There would be this, red-faced white guy flying a bush plane around Africa. Is that what they were going for? I don't know. Because what was his name? Ecumenical John or something?
Oh, I just had his name was Edwards.
Oh, okay.
That's what it's listed as in our movie database, but
I thought he gave himself like a weird.
What does ecumenical mean? I've heard that phrase before.
It's so like something having to do with religion. I thought it had to do with the trappings of religion, because this guy's always like bringing things back.
Representing a number of different Christian churches. That's what
Okay.
ecumenical means.
Okay. So he represents a bunch of different churches. His search for things and stuff.
He's gonna get Jesus all the ways he can.
Yep.
um, we cut to Philip finds Kokumo. And he's dressed like a locust, and then Kokumo suggests he's lost faith in God and he can't fight Pazuzu like this. And then Kokumo spits a tomato out of his mouth, and you see it impaled on the spike floor. And so Philip has to prove his faith by walking on the spikes, which this isn't like a bed of nails. This is like very separated spikes sticking out of the ground. And then he steps forward, and his foot is just impaled by like 3 spikes. And they're like, oh, that's awful. And then he falls forward, and you're like, oh, he's just about to die. And then like they cut to reality, and so it's just like, and it's like Dr. Kokumo, and he's just like a normal guy. He's not like this locust costume, like, kind of like what do you call that? Kind of ethereal being or something like that. So
Yeah, it's something. Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, he's just a doctor. He studies locusts. He talks about making good locusts, because a locust essentially is just a grasshopper that's evil or something. So,
I looked that up, and it's like, yeah, grasshoppers are, and it's certain kinds, but when drought conditions appear and food starts to get scarce, they actually like some chemical gets released into their body, and they actually change color. They go from like green to brown, and they start evolving in a certain way where they can fly longer and hop less.
yeah,
They start breeding like crazy,
yeah,
and they just eat all the food because they sense a drought is coming, and the only way to survive is to create billions of them and eat all the food.
yeah.
They can, so they
And not,
accelerate and outlast the starvation that they think is coming.
and don't they like have cannibalism too? Or like when they're on
Yeah.
flights to this flight, they like eat each other to
Yeah.
have enough energy to get there.
Yep, it becomes like a weird little cute hopping bug into something that will just like starve you to death. They'll just eat all your food, and there'll be billions of the things.
And can you eat locusts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can. They have been food that was mentioned a lot of times in history. I think it like might be the oldest insect that they know of.
Okay.
Like it might go back like 250 million
Oh,
years.
so this weird pattern works for locusts? Like just
Yeah,
keep
yeah,
going.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes back to like the Triassic period. Like, yeah, way before people existed.
So that would be in the Act 2. We got Act 3. Reagan wakes up and leaves the hospital. It's like the hospital's like, you can't do that, and they just let her go. So,
Yeah.
she has
She's not even an adult, and she's doing this. Like,
Philip is on his way back from Africa. We know that because we just cut to 747 footage. At least I think this is 747. I don't know. I think.
yeah, it's something like that. I always thought of it as like we see a picture of somebody walking somewhere, and then a plane, and then they're somewhere else, and it's like did they take a plane from the building to the street? Like, what weird shot, the way it was like spliced together. And there's a few scenes like that where it's people walking and then planes, and then they're walking somewhere else, and it's like, huh, okay.
Philip shows up at Reagan's apartment where Sharon is like standing in a bathrobe and that's wet and it's like see-through, and it's like, is this supposed to mean something? Is this gonna be where Father Philip gets like weird? Like, I need a woman.
I need the touch of a woman.
But Sharon just warns him away. Then we got to Reagan's at the museum. Philip just shows up anyway. They go to a seedy hotel and get out the sync hypnosis machine. So, and then they sync up and go into a Marin memory. Reagan wakes up from the hypnosis, and Philip gets up and just starts walking away with like strict like determination. He's not responding to anything. So you don't know if he's like is he kind of like possessed by Pazuzu here, or is he just like following like the vision or something?
I think what's happened now is Pazuzu.
Or is that what's that thing they say, like brushed by the wing of the demon or something like that?
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, because the James Earl Jones character, he says that the grasshoppers become locusts when they're brushed by too many wings, which
Okay.
means there's overpopulation cycle, I guess was the metaphor for that. But if you're brushed by the wings of Pazuzu, you're partially possessed.
Okay.
He has a certain level of control over you. It's kind of a metaphor, I guess. You really there's no like connective tissue that you can prove that with. It's just like there's so much weird shit going on. It's like, yeah,
Reagan follows after him. She calls Tuscan for help, like in between, and then Philip is heading to the house in Washington. There's like this race to Penn Station. Well, actually, they're going to the airport. Reagan and Philip are on the train, and Reagan grabs his wallet to buy tickets. And there's like this weird exchange where like the ticket attendant like thinks she's robbing him, and then finally like Philip like makes this like leave her alone. She belongs to me.
yeah, it's weird because it's very young girl and this old man.
Yeah,
Deep voice. She belongs to me.
yeah.
Okay.
Tuscan shows up and there's an accident keeping them from getting to the airport. And then Tuscan like they first just drive away, but then Tuscan like I guess her what's the oath that the Hippocratic oath takes for her?
Hippocratic oath, yes.
Yeah, and then she goes and helps the guy. So.
But I think all that means is don't harm people if you treat them. I don't think it means you're obligated to die or endanger your life to get out and treat people on road situations. Maybe it does. I don't know.
Tuscan and Sharon are on a plane as it experiences turbulence, so that makes sense because they say God's, Pazuzu affects that stuff. Everyone's converging on the house. Philip's in the house and gets attacked by locusts, which locusts just constantly appear and disappear in the scene, so you're never sure like what's real and what's not. The cab Tuscan.
They had a hell of a time with those locusts.
Yeah.
Those don't really exist here like that, like those kind. They had to import them from somewhere, and they were dying off very quickly. So yeah, a lot of those locusts were just dead locusts that were being thrown by set people. It's like throw those dead bugs.
Philip is attacked by the cab Tuscan and Sharon are in crash in front of the house.
Crash into the house.
Yeah, but like these scenes of inside the house and outside the house basically don't converge at all for the editing. They're basically might as well be miles apart. So
you know why that is, don't you?
Oh, is that what the other guy
they wouldn't
took
give
over?
them permission to film there anymore?
Oh,
so
okay.
They had to build it on a set.
Okay.
And then it was a front and back set. Not that they were connected. It was just like a facade, and then the set was like built on another set behind it. And that, it really did not coordinate. You didn't believe that it was the house even originally.
Yeah.
And so, and also they had to rebuild the stairs where the guy threw himself out.
Oh, okay.
He couldn't because City of Washington D.C. said, "No, you're not filming there. I don't care. You're not doing it again."
You fuckers spiked us last time. We're not doing that again. I think other movies have used that stairs. I think it was that.
I think so.
The last time I remember it, for some reason, I remember it's in a movie I haven't seen, but I know it's an Apple movie called Ghosted. It's like a CIA romance thriller.
Okay.
About like a guy who really likes this girl, and then it turns out she's like some CIA assassin or some shit. They went on a date, and she ghosted him. So. Anyways, there's a scene that takes place on those stairs, because it's a romantic movie. And yeah, go ahead, shoot there. Sharon leaves the car wreck. She seems totally fine. Tuscan's like stuck in a bunch of stuff. So the driver's, I don't know, I guess dead maybe. I don't know. I don't understand. I think he was kind of moving. But I can't remember. Sharon's acting all weird. We cut to there's an evil Reagan in the bedroom. And Philip gives evil Reagan like a hickey or something. So it's like,
this was the scene where I told you they wanted a really elaborate sex scene.
Yeah.
She's like, no. It's supposed to be like a teenager.
Yeah.
No, we're not doing this.
Good on her. So.
Yeah, well, it's different time.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, if you're 18 or you're an adult character, fine, do that. But no, when someone's under 18, that's just weird.
Yeah.
Don't do that. You're being gross. No, it's for the art. It's like, no, come on, stop.
Sharon starts a fire and kills herself. Well, I guess not just yet. This is weird. The voice of Kakumo guides Philip But also like the Spanish girl that haunts Philip, like kind of gets to him, like he hears her voice. Oh no, like because regular Reagan says "por qué," so he reminds her of her, the Spanish healer lady that sets herself on fire. Then we see a
Written in the script, there is regular, or there is normal Reagan, and there is succubus Reagan.
okay,
The woman with the contacts, that's succubus Reagan.
okay.
Uh, they couldn't use that term in the credits or whatever, so this became an informal thing.
A swarm of locusts descend upon Washington. Locusts swarm the house, and the house starts splitting open for reasons. Um,
One thing I noticed is like all the houses like in this neighborhood, you could tell they did the second unit shots were in this neighborhood or whatever, because no neighbors came outside for any in the street like, hey, what the hell's going on?
then like Reagan like thwarts the locust or something, or makes them good, and then they just disappear, or die and
She does
disappear.
the same thing Kokumu does in the
Okay.
earlier thing, but without the thing in his hand. She's
Oh.
just doing this.
Okay. All right.
He banishes because she, like him, has this power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Banish the bad.
She's now a healer, so
Yeah.
because she made that one girl talk, so she's a healer.
Right. Which, by the way, that was Dana Plato from Different.
Oh yeah,
Strokes.
yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that name, and I guess she's just kind of sort of infamous. She did like Different Strokes, and then did like Playboy at some point, and then was also infamous for doing
Bunch of pills and dying.
Yeah, that was crazy. I didn't realize she died so young. But the video game Night Trap, which became a whole thing where it's like people thought like video games are going to corrupt the youth, and then like you watch Night Trap, and it's like there's nothing about this that is anywhere remotely corrupting people. It's basically just a the video game is essentially just a video editing software where like videos play. You barely interact with the video game. So.
Yeah. Oh, the old the old saw about video games corrupting the youth is like, oh, those are innocent days when I hear that kind of talk.
they keep bringing it up because
it comes back every 10 years
because they can't when more problems happen, it's like, well, of course blame video games because look at them.
Yeah, I mean, why we can't like talk about the fact we've created a whole civilization of people that basically have nothing to lose. So need like 10 guys to have all the money in the world. So no, instead we're going to like, it's video games that are corrupting these people. Yeah, that's what's going
on. Oh, what the hell? Oh, Philip goes to a burnt Sharon and a regular Tuscan because I did write that as burnt Sharon and Tuscan. I'm like, well, Tuscan's not burnt, so I made that distinction. And then Sharon kind of like with her last breath says Reagan and then dies. So.
Which is sad and weird.
Yeah.
But another extended scene of self-immolation, the second one in this movie, and also a very weird scene where it's like people go from being hot, sweaty, and red skinned to second-degree burns instantly.
And then Tuscan like stands as like a bunch of emergency personnel coming up, and she's like struck by the light, which hints at this being like this whole thing being a synchronized hypnosis session because the sound starts playing, and like that's sort of interesting like twist on the end of the movie, but no idea. I don't know. There's no follow through eventually, but it's like an interesting just little thing at the end. It's like, oh, what does that mean?
Well, at this point in the movie, it has so completely gone off of any direction. It's like, they're just throwing shit.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like, why not have that in there too? Because that's the.
Well, I don't like what would that intimate, that there's like some third perspective we're just not knowing, and that's what the next movie would like be about,
or that these people are still all synchronized somehow.
Okay.
Or it's just a weird thing to put in there because we've thrown everything else at the wall.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest problem with this movie is has nothing to do with like the initial quality or anything. It's how the story becomes like measurably, proportionally more incoherent. This movie's 2 hours long. By the 1 hour mark, that graph just starts shooting to the coherent. Whatever's going on here is. It's not even worth trying to like, oh, does this have a deeper meaning? It's like, no, they're just throwing shit at the wall here. It's like they've lost the thread. They're not getting it back, but they're going to do increasingly bizarre visuals and weird cuts and elements and a guy wearing a locust costume. Like, hey, James Earl Jones in a locust costume is worth the price of admission. But yeah, it's just so bonkers by this point. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, whatever.
I mean, it's also kind of the fun little moment in between where it's like, you know, Father Philip is like Indiana Jones for a moment,
Yeah,
before that's a movie. I mean, that the serial stuff is heavily influenced the Indiana Jones stuff, so that probably influenced this stuff here too. So, but that's a part of the first movie too. Like the first half hour of that movie takes place in Iraq, so
yeah.
and like dealing with Pazuzu and oh, what's the ancient civilization that Pazuzu is associated with?
The Mesopotamian
Oh,
or
was it
what's
Sumerian? Like, is it Sumerians?
yeah, who's the maybe the Sumerians? There's one that's the language we can't translate.
Okay,
Was that some ancient Sumeria? It might be.
okay. Um, yeah. So that is that is Exorcist 2: The Heretic, another
Yeah.
John Borman movie. I don't. Yeah, like we're saying, it's like it's a perfectly fine movie if it wasn't attached to one of the greatest movies of all time. So, or
Yeah,
most
it's
infamous movies of all time, whatever you see it.
oh, The Exorcist is a great movie. I
Yeah,
recently watched that again. For me, it was rewatching it. You'd never seen it, and it's like it's really cool.
yeah,
It's kind of it's 70s film, but it's actually it is cool. And like the whole opening scene with Father Merrin, like you just don't expect that.
yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting also. It's a way to convey a lot of ideas that's really cool. This movie also had a lot of ideas, and it really it did try. What do they call that? Like you don't stick the landing or
Yeah,
whatever. It's like yeah, when they start pulling out that like I just call it like 70s VR hokum.
yeah.
Like oh, that's way ahead of its time. And visually the movie looks good. It's a creative story.
Yeah,
It just doesn't hold together.
yeah.
And then there's ridiculous acting in it. There's ridiculous dialogue. The acting is not the fault of the actors. It's just like this is what we're given.
Yeah.
Can't make this great because some of the dialogue was just like the whole
Yeah,
thing with
there's good dialogue and bad dialogue. It's like all over the place. So
yeah, I mean Richard Burton does his, but like I remember
it's not. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not an even quality. It's all over the place.
well Richard Burton is one of the greatest actors of the 20th century. He's in this movie. And he's like I said, when he says stuff, it's like I'm treating mental illness, you're fighting evil. Cool.
He
It's
almost
like
like a '60s theater
yes,
delivery. So
yeah, because he like changes the tone of his voice, and it's like that's fun. And like I said, I'll give it a lot of credit for creativity and original thinking, but I will also detract it for being so incoherent. I was just kind of gave up at a certain point. It's like, is this going to tie together? Have I missed something about this movie, or is it as bad as people say? And it's like, yes and no, but yeah,
I don't. Well, I mean, I think Internet Movie Database is a little too harsh on this movie. Amazon doesn't seem to care to give this 4 stars. This seems to me like a 3-star movie. Like it's
yeah,
fine. It doesn't break any boundaries. It's not terrible. There's not like literal production errors in it other than maybe some poor editing at some point, but that's like a choice, not because they didn't shoot it right or something like that.
yeah. John Borman got some kind of lung fungus, and like they had to stop shooting for a month and then reshoot, and then when they reshot it, they did the film wrong, so it was oversaturated. So I had to reshoot again, then edit, and it's all kinds of. I couldn't find like a complete answer. It was a lot of different stories, but I know there was just chaos on the set with that and people shooting things and just they didn't seem to storyboard this out like they do nowadays. Where it's like we do this, and then this, and then this. It's like, oh, we go to Ethiopia, and then we just go nuts, guys. We just start going crazy, and then we bring that same form of storytelling back to America, and it just ends in just a wild, incoherent, cacophonous mess.
Yeah.
It seemed like it's 2 hour long movie.
Yeah.
It seemed like, boy, what a grind to get to that finish line.
And like you said, it's not really a scary movie,
No,
and it's not really like it's it's not really a psychological horror movie. It's just kind of more of a psychological thriller or something.
it's like something's going on with these people. It's vaguely supernatural, but it seems to be kind of easy to foil it once you just get a few clues to beat an immortal demon and God himself. And it's like, yeah, I just got to solve the puzzle here, and we can tell it to go screw. Um, and but the thing is, like I said, it is not a cheap movie. It does not look bad. The production on it is pretty good.
Yeah.
The way the movie looks is great, especially the
Yeah.
first like 30
Yeah, because
minutes. This really looks like a great movie.
the version I watched seemed to have like kind of like imperfections, film imperfections. So they didn't they they seemingly did not do a remaster of it.
Sweep on it, yeah.
So it's so for that for an aged film that hasn't been cleaned up at all, it still looks pretty good. So like, and we can attest from like was it Extreme Prejudice, like that movie looks like shit, and not because it was badly shot movie, it was just pure neglect by whoever owns the rights to that movie. So.
Yeah, they're just putting it out. Just doing a PAL transfer onto a disc. Or
um
leave the bars in the corner where it says it's time to refill it. Like, what? It's on a DVD. What are you doing?
shit, we just took out the bits where it was shot in a movie theater.
Yeah.
On a VHS camcorder. Well, we're sending a probe into space containing the supercut of the imperfect scenes that is the Verhoeven Effect. Nathan, what one scene for this movie are we shoving into space?
One thing I want the hypno sync scene.
Okay.
Because I like everything about that, from the visual style, the sound design. It's like, if you're going to get something good out of this movie, it's like that concept and that approach was like really cool and totally original. I don't think anyone had done anything quite like that. It's like, we're going to blend the supernatural with psychology, and we're going to put a total batshit BS science thing in the middle of it. It's like, we will stand evil with science. It's like, no, you just make it more powerful. And it really was. It was virtual reality before anyone had any concept of what that would be. It's only the computer.
I mean, Tron was 2 years away, but
yeah,
which means it was probably in production by that time. But whatever.
But this was virtual reality, where the human brain was like the processor.
Yeah,
you just had to sync them up, and you could live in people's dreams, which to me is way more scary than any computer environment you could go into, because human brains are a mess.
Did I ever tell you? I'm not sure if I said it on the podcast before, but ever tell you my Friday the 13th idea?
No.
So it's kind of like flip thing. Well, not Friday the 13th. Nightmare on Elm Street idea.
Okay.
So you kind of flip things on their head, and you make Freddy the hero of the movie, quote unquote. So you have an alien invasion, and we cannot stop the aliens, and FBI agents have to resurrect Freddy Krueger to get him to fight the aliens in their dream worlds, which are completely alien to us as well.
Yeah, that'd be frightening.
And so, like, the FBI agents and Freddy Krueger are like killing aliens in their dreams, and then like Freddy Krueger feels like a sense of like innocence, and like maybe he can be forgiven, even though he's unforgivable. And then right at the end, the FBI agents betray him because he's Freddy fucking Krueger, and you can't trust that fucker.
Child molesting murderer.
Yes. There's no forgiveness for that.
Yeah.
So.
There's no heaven for you. So it is written. But yeah. It's like that Greg Bear book he wrote about where aliens invade, and they're not unstoppable, but like, we're going to run out of weapons trying to fight them, and they're clearly being reinforced. So they actually find Dracula. It looks like pure sci-fi, like the movie or the book reads like sci-fi.
Yeah.
They fight the aliens to kind of a standstill, but humanity is going to be overwhelmed because the aliens are about to release because they do have superior technology, but you just can't fight that many humans, with army equipment on their own planet. So they're about to switch over to biological weapons, which will kill us. And so and the people in the military, what's left of the military, know this. So somebody's like, oh, there's evil in Eastern Europe we can call on to help us. And they explain to it's Vlad the Impaler, like, oh,
Yeah.
we need your power to defeat these things. So he creates an army of vampires. Defeats like the whole book goes 180 because it was just like a basic alien invasion story from like the 80s,
Yeah.
these 90s, and then all of a sudden it's like now there's vampires. Like, what? This is weird. Because the aliens invading are like they're dogs. They're like dog humans,
Yeah.
and they have the same system of dominance that dogs do. So they don't understand why humans don't just submit like a dog would. They're like, why do these monkey people, like, you tell them not to do something or you kill them and then they fight you, and then once you kill one of them and the rest of them see you kill them, then they attack you? Are they crazy? Like, so the aliens are kind of stupid. They're like, why don't they just submit? We would help because they're supposedly operating on dog psychology.
Oh, okay.
And it's like, yeah, you can't, because you can, like, here, drive this truck for me, you're a truck driver now, and then they like steal everything off the truck. Like, why do the humans do this? And it's like, so it's kind of interesting. But then when it became vampires halfway through, it's like, maybe if they like resurrected vampires genetically or something, it would have been cool. It's not like, oh, some lady in Eastern Europe knows where Dracula lives. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book. Like, I think it's called Blind Sight, where
No.
humans like find that vampires were actually the one thing that preyed on people, and we wiped them out. But then in like the 22nd century, we found their DNA and brought them back because they're like 10 times smarter than us. So we could use them to like solve math problems and things.
Okay.
And then we sent a crew into space, into deep space, because we found an alien probe, but the captain was a vampire.
Okay.
But they had to give them special drugs, so they just didn't eat everyone, and they ran out of special drugs. But it turns out like the vampire had some kind of bomb in his brain that could be activated, so it would kill him. And it's a wild story because it has to do with alien invasion, and it's one of the most, I think it's called Blind Sight. I don't know. It's one of the most interesting sci-fi things I've read in a long time.
Huh.
But yeah, that was years ago. But yeah, so Heretic.
You can find us on Letterboxd, username VHE. 1 out of 5 stars. What are you giving this, Nathan?
I'm going to give this 2.5.
Okay.
Because I would give it a 3 or maybe even a 4 for creativity. But
you want to split it exactly in half. So
yes, because that story just jumps off a cliff. And it's like, what's going on and why? And then by the last 15 minutes, it's like, do I even care to watch the end scene?
Yeah.
Unless it's going to be like Life Force, where Reagan starts draining everyone of takes Washington over. It's like, I'm interested in this.
Well, you can find us at verhoeveneffect.com. There we have listener support. You can support us on monthly stipend on 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. Cancel anytime. You can rate our podcast on whatever platform of choice. You can rate us whatever you want. The only thing the algorithm listens to is the highest rating. Remember, control the algorithm.
Control it.
Give us the highest rating. You can find
Make
us.
a deal with God, also known as the algorithm.
Run up that hill.
Cut a hole in that blanket.
You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us at Blue Sky Social at Verhoeven Effect, and you can find us at Facebook Verhoeven Effect, and you can find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory. You can watch both this and that show live and unedited. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.